Have you ever considered murdering somebody? If so, then you should read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. And one question before we get to the review: did I enjoy this read? And the answer is yes. Welcome to Whiskey and Literature. I'm your host, Captain Mike, and I'm reading and reviewing 52 books in 52 weeks in 2023. This is my 37th book review of the year so far, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. And before we get to the book, let's talk about the author. Fyodor Dostoyevsky, Russian novelist and short story author. He and I share a birthday, November 11th, though he was born in 1821 and he passed away in 1881. Considered by many people to be one of the greatest authors of modern literature. I'm reading two of his great books this year, Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. He was an engineer by trade and he translated books for extra income. So he was arrested for belonging to a book club that discussed banned books and sent to a forced labor camp in Siberia for 4 years and then compulsory military service for 6 more years in exile. Wowza, what a life! Okay, let's discuss the specs and stats of Crime and Punishment. It was originally released in 12 installments in 1866 and then in a later time in a single volume. It is widely considered one of the greatest works of all time and just barely missed being in my top 10 greatest books of all time for this year's reading list. There are numerous translations for this book because of course it was written in Russian originally. One of the earliest translations was done by Constance Garnett, and she did the copy that I listened to, very small part of it, on Audible. The book that I read here, it was translated in 1968 by Sidney Monas. And my copy of the book has 522 pages. Okay, let's talk about the style of Crime and Punishment. Like a lot of the books that I'm reading this year, it was written with a third-person omniscient style narrative perspective, and it's mostly from Raskolnikov's point of view, though occasionally we switch to other characters in the book as well. This was a radical choice because it wasn't typical for this time period, and it confused quite a few of the readers. The book is subdivided into 6 parts with an epilogue. Nihilism, alienation, nationalism, and the idea of the Superman. Nihilism, alienation, nationalism, rationalism. Okay, themes in the book include nihilism, alienation, rationalism, and the idea of a Superman or a person who is kind of above the law or outside of the morals that most people adhere to. And speaking of the Superman, let's talk about the only character in the book that we're going to discuss, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. And he is like a walking enigma. He can be cold and blunt, but then warm and compassionate. He murdered somebody, he killed somebody just to take their money. And then he gives away his last kopeck to somebody in need. And all the other characters in the book are just there so that we can explore different parts of Raskolnikov's psychology. Because that's really what this book is for. That's what Dostoyevsky thought he wanted it to be. An example of what could happen if we take Western ideology, that rationalism, to the utmost extreme. Everyone else in the book just revolves around Raskolnikov's sphere. His family, his friends, the police, the pawnbroker, his neighbors and Dunia's would-be or ex-suitors and fiancés. All right, let's discuss the plot of Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov, he is an impoverished former student who decides to kill a pawnbroker to take her money. He fancies himself a kind of Superman, an individual who is an extraordinary. And if he could just lift himself out of his poverty, he could do amazing and great things. And he feels like his accomplishments would outweigh killing one single person. And especially someone who he thinks or he hears and no one really likes this pawnbroker. And she takes her money and she just hoards it and figuratively and literally just stuffs it under her mattress. So he does the deed and he takes her life. And her sister comes in while he's in the act of killing the pawnbroker, and so her sister gets the axe as well. And Raskolnikov, he reasoned that his rational mind would not be affected by taking a life, by this killing. And in a way it's not, or he thinks it's not. But still, it manifests these effects in both his health and his relationships. So how does he deal with it? Or does he even deal with it? Does he seek for or even look for repentance and forgiveness? And that's really all we're going to talk about, the plot. I think that whole plot, it was pretty amazing. Okay, so let's talk about my thoughts of Crime and Punishment. And honestly, I have considered murdering people. Usually it's just other drivers on the road. But I have thought and considered what would be the after effects of taking a life. How heavy would that weigh on your soul and on your conscience? And I think it would be terrible. Overall, I do think that this was a fantastic read, and it makes me more excited to read Dostoyevsky's other book, The Brothers Karamazov. And this does deserve, it is one of the greatest books of all time, and it deserves a spot on your shelf. Having said that, let me address this translation in the book that I read by Sidney Monas from 1968. I'm reading this book and I'm thinking, this cannot be the flow, the way that Dostoyevsky wrote this book. I know there's some complaints about the Constance Garnett translation, and I read her Anna Karenina already this year, and Dostoyevsky's next book, The Brothers Karamazov, that I have, that is translated by Constance Garnett. And honestly, I'm happy that I'm not reading another Sidney Monas translation. So what I'm saying is, if you are looking to buy translations of books, it's something that I've not really dealt with before this year. But I'm finding that the translator does make a difference. And I'm reading this book and I was like, man, it is so, I feel like clunky. That's a weird word for a translation, but it's really the only word that I could come to think of while I was reading this book. I feel like it is a clunky translation. And I am by no means trained in literary arts, or I'm no, guru of translators or anything like that. I'm just a dude who likes to read. But I'm reading this book, and it's one of the greatest books of all time, apparently. I mean, I think it is. I really, really enjoyed this read. But I feel like I'm looking at a beautiful painting, and maybe it's through a foggy glass or something like that, that there are shades of meaning that are lost in translation. And I don't think it's possible to entirely overcome that when you translate from Russian to English or English to Japanese or whatever the translation might be. I think there's always going to be nuances that are lost. Anyway, all I'm really saying is there are some turns of phrases in this book that I just can't believe that's what Dostoyevsky intended. I'm not going to take the time to, learn Russian to read this in the original text, but I do look forward to reading the Constant Garnett translation of The Brothers Karamazov and comparing how I feel about that to this Sidney Monas in Crime and Punishment. So that's just my thoughts on this translation. And so if you are looking to get into these types of books, do a little bit of due diligence, and you don't need to find the best translation, if that even really exists or is really a thing. I don't know. But this, from all the books I've read so far this year, is the first one that I really feel like the translator himself has let me down. And I listened to just a tad of this book on Audible, so it was just a small bit, so I really can't speak to that other than, I enjoyed it and it seemed decent. Basically, I listened to the very last part of part 6, which is the last part of the book, and the epilogue on Audible. Everything else, I read the entire book. And I'm going to read to you from page 399 of my copy of the book. As I'm reading this, I thought, this is the whole point of the book. This is what the entire story is about. And a little bit of backstory. Raskolnikov, this is, of course, is pretty far into the book. And he's talking to Sonia, which is his love. It's a girl that he likes and he wants to be with her. And he confesses to the killing to her. He tells her that he is the one who killed the pawnbroker and her friend, the pawnbroker's sister, that she was a friend of his girl that he likes. So he's telling, and it's a great chapter, and I really appreciated this. And he's sung how, he's like, did I have the right to kill? And Sonia says, to kill? The right to kill? And Sonia threw up her hands. Ah, Sonia, he exclaimed irritably and wanted to make some objection, but instead kept a contemptuous silence. Don't interrupt me, Sonia. There was just one thing I wanted to prove to you, that the devil led me on. And then he made it clear to me I didn't have the right, because I'm exactly the same species of louse as all the rest. He laughed at me. That's why I'm here now. If I weren't a louse, would I have come to you? Listen, the time I went to the old woman's, I was just going to give it a try. You must know that. And you killed her. You killed. What do you mean killed? Is killing done like that? The way I did it? Sometime I'll tell you what it was like. And here's the most important part. Did I kill the old hag? No, not the old hag. I killed myself. I went there, and all at once I did away with myself forever. But it was the devil killed the old hag, not me. Enough, Sonia, enough, enough. Let me be, he cried out suddenly in shuddering misery. Let me be. He put his elbows on his knees and pressed his head in his hands as in a pair of tongs. How you're suffering, Sonia cried out in anguish. So I read that and I was like, that's the whole point of the book. In Raskolnikov's mind, he didn't kill the hag. He didn't kill the pawnbroker. He's recognizing in this moment, he killed himself. And I think that's what it would be like in those moments when I don't know, I really consider murdering somebody, but when I think about what it would be like after making a terrible choice like that, I think it would be, they talk about hell being some place where you go to. I don't think hell exists. I don't think there's some hell, some fire and brimstone. I think it's a place where you torment yourself for the things and the deeds that you have done. And that's what he's talking about. Anyway, that's I thought that was a great part of the book. and it really has some very impactful chapters like that, where that whole chapter, he was basically telling Sonia about that and what he's gone through. This is the point of the whole book, right? He killed a woman, and can he be redeemed? Does he search for that redemption? Can he find forgiveness? Does he even recognize that he needs or that he wants forgiveness? Honestly, it was so very well done. Though I do, in the coming years, want to read this book with a different translation. All right, guys, on to the star rating. And I judge all my books on 5 criteria and 6 if I listen to it on Audible. So let's get at it. First, initial response. How do I feel as soon as I finish this book? And I gave it a 4. I thought it was a great book, felt pretty good. Recommendation, how likely am I to recommend this book? And I only gave it a 3 because, I do think most people that I know would not actually read this book. And if they even tried to read the book, I think a lot of people would not be able to get through the book. Though I was at work today talking to a coworker, and she's an avid reader, and we were just discussing, as I was finishing the script for this video here, I was telling her what I was doing, and as I described the plot of the book, she wrote it down. She was very interested in it. So there are those out there. And I think if you like to read and you're interested in this sort of stuff, certainly if you're interested in psychology, Fyodor Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment is for you. But for me overall, it's a 3 on the recommendation. Style, did I enjoy the writing style? 5. You know, that omniscient style narration, it's a great, it's got a 5. The plot and structure, also a 5. How engaged was I in the story? Really engaged. I appreciated. I was turning those pages. Characters, were they relatable, believable, engaging? Also a 5 for the characters. I thought they were all really well done. I could see them. I could feel some of their anger, their anguish, their need, their madness in some cases. Their doggedness when talking about the policeman. I thought they were really well done. 5. And Audible. For those books I listened to on Audible, how was the production? And it got a 4. Okay, so that's 26. And 26 divided by 6 is 4.33. So 4.33 stars for Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I think that's well deserved and a great score for this book. All right, my guys. If you enjoyed the video, like it, it's free. Subscribe to see more of my content. And yes, I do both whiskey and book reviews. The channel is called Whiskey and Literature after all. So I know that's confusing for just about everybody, but subscribe to see more of my content. I will link a description or links for all the book reviews that I'm doing this year. As I get them done, I will put them in the description below. Feel free to check all those out. And for now, I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great. Turn the pages, my friends, and stay thirsty. Cheers.